Okay, hello everybody. Thank you again for joining us today. We're really happy to have you here. Definitely give me a quick thumbs up if you've been with us before. I'd love to see that, and it's great to see you again if you've been on one of our webinars in the past. We have a lot of these happening throughout and until June. So thank you again for joining us, whether it's your lunch, starting of your day, or mid-afternoon. My name is Amanda Schaefer. I actually work on the product side with graduate school and alongside Bruce. So I'm pleased to introduce Bruce today, an engaging trainer and program manager who brings more than 25 years of practical project and program management experience across multiple industries. He delivers effective, real-world training and has a strong ability to connect with adult learners from a wide range of professional backgrounds. Here at Graduate School, Bruce teaches in areas of product management, data, and or project management, data, and technology, helping federal professionals strengthen both foundational and emerging skill sets. He is particularly skilled at building stakeholder relationships and coordinating multidisciplinary teams to deliver real-world solutions. Today, Bruce will be exploring how artificial intelligence is reshaping the landscape of project management, from the genuine opportunities AI presents to its real limitations and the best practices that will help practitioners use it wisely and effectively. Please join me in welcoming Bruce.
Amanda, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be speaking with you today. Thank you. I see a couple of hand claps there. So I'm hoping you're able to download the one pager. There are several questions on this one pager that I want you to sort of reflect on as we work through the webinar today. And as Amanda pointed out, this is an introduction. It's going to be very high level. We are not going to be doing any hands-on tool usage, just because everyone's agency might have different tools, might have different AI tools, but what we're going to use and discuss here today is going to be applicable across project and program management in the federal workspace. Now, I just put a link into the chat as well. We have many AI courses that are available, and they are much more hands-on, they're more in-depth, they're more practical as well. So I'm going to share at the end of the webinar a couple of those that I think are most relevant as well. So I want to thank you all for taking time today, whether it be your lunch or otherwise, and joining us here today. So why does AI matter to federal project managers? And I want you to also see that this is the first topic in that one pager. We're seeing that AI tools are becoming more and more embedded in our workplace software. And there is also an expectation that we are analyzing and reporting on the activities and the performance of our activities in a much faster way. And is a career, the project management discipline is going to continue to be impacted by how AI tools can be used. And I've seen this over my lifetime as a project manager. When we think back, we were doing traditional projects for quite a long time, and then Agile came across to the scene. And for the past decade and a half, Agile has been something that has really impacted how we manage and run projects. And then, now with AI, we started seeing this a couple years ago before even OpenAI published their ChatGPT. But we started to see how AI tools were starting to impact project management. And, there are both in the private sector and in the public sector, AI is starting to be incorporated into our workflows as project managers. So I want you to think about how you feel about AI at work. We're at a space now where AI is encouraged. So it hasn't always been encouraged. Using AI capabilities is encouraged, but we also need to think about how are we responsibly using AI tools in our work. And one of the things, this is going to be a theme, you're going to hear this several times, why AI matters for federal PMs is it's going to help us to work through and offload the repetitive tasks that we often do. So those time-consuming repetitive tasks that we do as project and program officers and project managers. And so one of the other questions I want you to reflect on is which of your project tasks or day-to-day tasks consume the most time but require very little of your own judgment. So this is an area where definitely AI can be helpful. Now, when we look at the the full impact of AI, this is a quote from the Project Management Institute, and you're going to see me reference them several times. The Project Management Institute is the international standards body for project management. And this is something that they had in one of their journals. AI isn't on the horizon, it's here now, and it's changing everything. So it's clear that we have to sort of work with this. And in this webinar today, as Amanda pointed out, this is an introduction. This is an overview. This is hopefully going to allow you to better understand what each of the components and types and methods that are used within artificial intelligence. It's going to help you differentiate between different AI types. We're going to discuss quite a bit about how AI is used in our jobs. And then also touch on ethical, security, and compliance regulations. These are some of the limitations that we have with AI. And then lastly, we'll touch on how AI can support our human judgment, but it is not a replacement. And if you were looking for more hands-on tool usage, that's definitely where our courses would definitely help you out. And we've got courses on many different levels. But this is what we're going to cover today. All right. So when we start thinking about artificial intelligence, this is the broad field of creating systems that mimic human intelligence. So they're basically mimicking reasoning, learning, and problem solving. And these are systems that are basically trying to do what a human can do. And how do they do this? They do this through learning the patterns in the data and then generating insights, summaries, and other outputs such as recommendations. So think of artificial intelligence as this sort of top level view. And again, this is mimicking human intelligence. And then we looked at the types of AI. Again, when we see AI, this is at a high level. One of the sub areas within AI is machine learning. So you see that in the second part here. And machine learning is this subset that uses models and algorithms to look for patterns within the data sets, within data. And then it teaches these to learn and adapt and sort of look at the patterns. So machine learning is one of the big subsets within artificial intelligence. And then when we look even lower on this chart, there is a concept of deep learning. This is a subset of machine learning that uses neural networks. And neural networks were basically modeled off of the human brain and how the human brains work, which is why it says that it uses neural networks. And these are really to run things through multiple networks and figuring out whether something is a cat or a dog or an animal or a picture or music. And deep learning is a subcomponent and a subset of machine learning. And then the tools that we see much more frequently in our use now are the generative AI tools. And these are a subset of deep learning. And so these are when we're interacting with models, we're interacting with algorithms, and we're either prompting it to create and generate. That's where the generative comes from. So generating text, generating images, generating audio, and generating video. So these are all things that it can generate. However, these are built off of patterns that have been learned from data sets and from training. So throughout our webinar today, this is one slide. If you haven't seen this before, this is from the GAO. I'd recommend taking a screenshot of this. So this gives a pretty good view and shows the hierarchy of artificial intelligence at the top level. A subset of that is machine learning. A subset of that is deep learning. And then further, you get generative AI. So this gives you a way to navigate and see how everything fits together. Now, as I mentioned, machine learning is a subset, and this allows systems to sort of learn those patterns from those large sets of data. And it is trained on examples, and it looks at both taking that training to predict and to generate. And so all of the modern generative AI tools, these are all based and trained on using machine learning. And then one key thing to know, as you've heard me say, data, think of it as the fuel. Think of it as the energy for artificial intelligence. Um, Everything that these models are doing, they're learning from data. So that's what sort of energizes it and moves it through. And data can come in both structured and unstructured. And I'm not going to go into that too deeply because that's normally covered in a day long. But structured data is things that are can be understood, kept in, say, data files. They are data that's been collected and has very common table-like structure. Unstructured is more around the human voice or text. So understanding language, which may not be easily structured into sort of a table. So there's using this, and then like anything else, these systems they're only as good as what they've been trained on. So data quality, is important for the is important for training these. So again, it's the quality is important, and it's important to know too that there are two types of training data. We've got or two types of data. We've got training data. This is what is used to teach the models. And then after the model has been taught and the researchers feel like they that the model is doing what it should, then you test it against testing data. And this is data that's similar to the training data, but not exactly. And then you see how does that model, how does that algorithm operate based off of this new testing data? Is it able to correctly answer or properly do the work that it should? And so this is, again, the takeaway here is think of data as the fuel, as the energy for artificial intelligence. Now, one other topic is algorithms and models. You may often hear these terms. Sometimes they get mixed together, but algorithms are the methods that are used to train these models. And there can be some very sophisticated methods. So there's things like linear regression. You can have decision trees. And if you've seen those, you sort of walk through if Y, you go this way, if you go X is that way, or the neural networks. And so these algorithms are the methods that are used. The model is really the end result. This is the mathematical brain that is trained on the data. So here, I just want you to sort of understand there is a difference between algorithms and models. Now, on that hierarchy chart that we just saw a couple of slides prior to this, it didn't have natural language processing, but this is one of the specialized branches of machine learning. So this is it's a subset of machine learning that really focuses on human language. And this is the unstructured data because there isn't, with our human language, we're not going to have everything in a very organized manner. And what natural language processing, or NLP, this really helps the systems to understand the intent, the tone, and even patterns in our language. And the generative AI tools that we use, those are also they've been built using NLP techniques. So they're obviously when they're trying to understand our instructions, understand our intent, they're using NLP before they're generating the output for their systems. And then I've mentioned generative AI several times. These are systems that create new content. It can be text, it's audio, it's video. They respond to different inputs. Typical are the text-based input, but we do know things that, there is voice-based instructions that can happen as well. And these are not smart that they think. It really is taking an input and then it predicts off of that input. And it's really using probability sort of models to uh, show a result in the end. Now we know these generative AI tools, they're good for creativity. They're really, really good for automation, which is what we're going to be focusing on later on as project management and project program management individuals. They're good for simulation and for also exploration. So generative AI is very important. Now, what I'm going to show you here is how the AI works somewhat under the hood. So we've got where the model and the tool will learn the patterns from the data. It then builds some internal representations of that. It then uses probabilistic prediction. So this is where the probability comes into play, and then generates new outputs based on what it's been learning. And then there is this refinement and fine tuning that happens. So the generative AI will actually continue to improve through the feedback that it receives, and then it continues onward. So, again, it starts with data. It starts then with generating and learning patterns, and then using probability to generate whatever output is required and requested of it. So this is another slide. If you wanted to do a screenshot, I would recommend. This is pretty key to show the sort of inner workings of generative AI. So let's get down to how AI can actually um, work for us. And in general, let's pull aside the project manager roles and job descriptions. We know that these tools can help us be more productive. One of the, again, being able to do research faster, to automate some of the more mundane and repetitive tasks. It can increase our creativity. These tools are really good for brainstorming or coming up with new or novel ideas. I've already mentioned automating these repetitive or tedious tasks. Um, Generative AI can also help you with learning. So many of these tools have sort of, they have within their data sets, a lot of deep information. And they also now have ways that you can interact with it as if it's more a Socratic method, or even sort of looking at how to be a learner with the system as well. So, not only making you more productive, but help you learn new information and new skills as well. AI is really good at taking in large data and analyzing it and helping you make better decisions. And then lastly, it can help you to extend your capabilities, because in some ways, if you're able to figure out what use cases and what tasks you want to offload, then you're able to sort of start thinking about the higher level um, tasks that you're required to work on. And we know there's lots of different generative AI tools out there. One of the most common, especially within the federal workplace, is the Microsoft Copilot. And I just put a link in the chat. So this is one that most everyone in the federal government should have available on your computer. And this is obviously, if you want to, I would say open it up now and sort of just see if this is something that you've worked with before. ChatGPT from OpenAI, this is probably the most famous one. That's another tool. Um, Google Gemini for those agencies that are more Google focused. I know the GSA is like that. This would be the link here to the Gemini. Claude is another one, and then Perplexity. Now, these are the public ones. Many agencies have their own sort of more focused to your own agency's mission, that have also been blessed by your agency's security and IT people. But these are probably the most common of the more public generative AI tools. All right, so let's now think about what are some of the common AI use cases for program office or program and project individuals. And this is on the handout. This is at the bottom of the handout. Think about some of the things that these tools could do for you. One that many of us have seen are being able to take the notes and generate that from either the transcript, or to generate a formal status report in a certain format from just raw notes as well. Um, Generative AI is also good at looking at data and where there might be some unusual changes. So, this sort of falls under the broader category, perhaps, of fraud and waste, but this is a good analysis tool. Extracting themes from large documents. I've used generative AI often for very long and complex documents, trying to summarize them or to pull key information out of it. The generative AI tools do very well with that. Analyzing open-ended survey responses. A good example is being able to take the data that's in a survey and have it run through these tools and have it provide the likely sentiment of the people who were surveyed. And this is pretty helpful. And then, the last one there is having your help desk, or having some sort of ticket system, being able to quickly report on and categorize what type of issues are coming in. So many ticket systems now that your IT departments are using may already have AI embedded in it, so that it quickly can do this without having to export data out of your help desk support systems into another generative AI. But these are all things that can be done and that are common use cases for generative AI. Now, if we look at the at that one pager that we shared at the beginning, there's a reflection question. So, which use case do you think would provide the greatest value in your current projects? So I'm just going to give you a little bit to think about that. And there were actually a couple of different use cases in the on the one pager. So preparing stakeholder briefings. So any sort of stakeholder summarization, identifying risks or patterns in performance data. And so my hope is that you walk away from today's webinar at least thinking of a couple of cases where you might be able to start applying and using generative AI tools. All right. So now I'm going to cover how project managers and program managers really interact with generative AI. And there's a couple of key things here. Prompt engineering, it's sort of a new skill set that has been growing of importance over the past couple of years. We're going to be talking about a workflow that we as project managers may want to use. And then I'm also, as part of the prompt engineering, look at how, there's different prompt examples. And if you were to join our full day or multi-day courses, you're going to get into these into much more depth. You're going to practice different prompting methods and do that as well. So prompt engineering is the skill set of clearly and intentionally guiding the generative AI through your text instructions. And what this means is you're providing key information, so context of what you're trying to do, structure of the output that you're wanting. Often you can put constraints. So the constraints that I most often use are keep the result concise, or I need this in a bullet form, or please generate this in a table. And then lastly is purpose, giving it sort of not only the context, but what is the purpose of what's being done. And prompt engineering, if you're using more vague or broad language, you're going to get vague and inaccurate responses from the system. And it's really prompt engineering with more precise and intentional prompts. You're going to get much better results. They're going to be accurate, they're going to be relevant, and they're going to be useful. And if you've worked with how you're providing instructions to these systems, you can see that you're starting to even train yourself to be more precise on what the structure of the output is, or what sort of constraints you want to give the system. And this really is a skill that you learn a little bit just by hands-on doing, in a way. Now, the Project Management Institute, again, the International Association of Project Managers, their website is www.pmi.org. They have a certification for managing AI. It's pretty intense. But the other thing is that they've got a generative AI tool called PMI Infinity. And this tool, which you can find it off their main website, this tool is really tailored toward the project manager. It's going to have a similar look and feel as the other generative AI tools, but it's been trained on and is much more tuned to project management information, project management vocabulary, and project management information. So I just wanted to sort of highlight here that while this is not widely used in the public, the PMI Infinity tool is definitely something to take a look at some point for the project management areas. And then when we start to think about what are some of the other use cases that we have, and this chart here, I've just sort of broken it down by the project phase, and things that we can do with generative AI during the initiation or the start of a project. Generative AI is excellent at giving you draft project charter text or communication, messaging, or even coming up with your stakeholder list. So, in many ways, what you're seeing here is that there's a lot of things that would be sort of time intensive for a project manager. You could start doing by sort of relying on the Gen AI tool to help you generate these documents or get organized at the beginning. During the planning project phase, Gen AI, again, because it's good at sort of coming up with ideas, help to identify risks and then coming up with risk response plans. So if you get into the point where you've got mature risk management and risk identification with your team, this can help speed it up as well. And this planning phase can help you during the planning phase by taking inputs from what you're working and planning on, and then allowing the system to generate ideas around where there's risk in the schedule, where there's risk in the technical space, and so I think this is actually a very key way to use generative AI as sort of a tool to enhance what you're doing with your risk planning. During the execution of a project, many of our tools now, and many of us are using them, having summaries generated from meetings, being able to also maintain tracking and action item lists. This is another area that Gen AI is also being used. And while you're monitoring and controlling a project, this is where you can input performance data from your vendors or from your internal teams to look at how are things trending, how are the impacts on your schedule and your budget. And then lastly, during that closeout of your project or acquisition, it can also go through files that you have and generate some sort of retrospective summaries. And it can sort of call out, here are some of the areas that were tricky, here are some of the areas that we can learn lessons from. And this assumes that you've got data either in SharePoint or in a sort of a drive that's accessible by the system as well. But we, as in the project management field, there is a lot of use cases across the life cycle of a project that we can use the generative AI. And the Project Management Institute has done some studies on this, and it shows these are some of the typical areas where we have seen productivity gains. So I guess they went out and surveyed a whole broad range of international project managers, and specific to our domain, these are the areas that we can expect to get some productivity gains from using the generative AI tools. So analyzing data, summarizing and reviewing content, reporting. I find this very useful. If you provide a template to generative AI, it can generate based on other information. It can populate that template for you. Communication, helping us with writing, helping us with emails, helping us with even how to display and show content on slides. Generative AI is very good at that. Talent support, so the decision support on pros and cons, and then lastly, if you're working with data that's more around resources and resource management, it's helpful in that as well. So again, this is from the Project Management Institute. It was through a survey that they completed. back in 2024, 2025. Now, let me talk to you about a typical workflow, and this is very tactical for us as project managers. And this is what I hope I encourage you to take a screenshot of this as well. This is a typical workflow on how we should be embedding or introducing AI um, into one of our use cases or workflows. And so what the first step is to identify some sort of problem space that is ripe for automation or could use and benefit from the insertion of AI. Um, so that's first is really figuring out what is the problem that we're trying to solve. So you need to understand what the problem is, what's the need. This could be something like, I'm constantly reviewing data from three different individuals, and I need to summarize it into one report for our director. And then second is looking at what are the prompt? How do we devise the proper prompt in order to get the response that we want? So again, this is something the project manager needs to do. And then you actually get to the point where you're using the AI tool and it can generate something. So it can be a draft that it generates, or it can provide some analysis. So again, using the fact that you're needing to coordinate and collate and basically aggregate data from multiple sources into a single status report. This is the step where you can have the system generate a draft for you. Um, then right after the system has generated some output, um, then there's a step where you need to do a quality check. So you need to validate the accuracy and validate if there's any bias in the result. So by not doing this, you need to you're basically going to potentially share information that may not be fully accurate. And then this applied judgment is the next one. This is where, if you need to make changes, if you need to adjust the output, that's important. And then lastly, implementing the solution. And then, as a project manager, we should be owning the solution and owning the outcome. And so, ultimately, think of AI, it's only going to be a tool that we use. It's not a full solution, but it is something that we're still responsible as project managers to own the outcome. And the visual I'm showing you on the bottom there of this workflow, the AI is only one step in this very tactical workflow. Now, if we go back to the handout, and it looks like we've got one person who needs to receive the handout. I'm going to put it in the chat again. I want you to reflect on, do you have any use cases, or do you have something in your managing your projects that you could potentially rely on AI to help you either be more effective or do something faster or to analyze something faster? So again, I would just want you to think about that. And my recommendation is you got to start with a problem, a pain point, or a need. All right. Now, when we talk about prompting, and we're going to, if you join us in one of our full day courses, we cover this in depth. There is what's called a race prompting framework. And the race prompting framework basically, race comes from the four letters of the beginning of these. And I would encourage you take a screenshot of this one. This is how I learned to build out my prompts and how to become much more precise in what instructions I'm giving the system. So first, you want to provide a role. So what role do you want the model to take? Then you want an action. So then this is where we're asking the generative AI tool to do something. So either generate a report, summarize this information, look for outliers in the data, then providing context or constraints. This is where we would say we want the output to be shared with executives or with stakeholders who have very short time spans. And then lastly is an expectation on what the desired output is. And so this is another key thing. So I use this. This is how I will do my prompts, and I'll show you in the next couple of slides what that looks like. But this race prompting framework, by making sure you have a role, an action, a context or constraint, and an expectation, that is going to help with improving your prompting. So here's an example. The first one is fairly weak. Write a project status update using the provided information. So there's some information that's been provided. You're not going to get that much. You may get a response. It may be so-so, but a much stronger prompt, includes that race. So act as a project manager using the provided information, draft a one-page update for a federal IT modernization project using schedule risks and next steps, using plain language suitable for senior leadership. Do not include sensitive data. So here, we've given it a role as a project manager. We're asking for the action, generate a one-page status update. And we're giving context. This is for an IT modernization project that's suitable for senior leadership. And then we've put an expectation, a constraint on it. Do not include sensitive data. So I think this is, and we've got a course where you spend a lot of time refining this, and you become very, very good at it through that course. And so this is a good example of going from a weak prompt to using that race methodology to get a stronger one. Now, here's another prompt example, just done a little bit differently. You could even have your prompt generated like this, where you actually have role. You are a senior project manager with expertise in Agile. Action, draft a stakeholder update email explaining a 2-week project delay. Context, the delay is due to the vendor supply issues. And the audience are executive stakeholders who value transparency and proactive mitigation steps. And then you can give an expectation. Make this concise, 200 to 250 words, that explains the cause of delay, a revised delivery timeline, and list 2 to 3 mitigation actions. And the tone should be professional, clear, and reassuring. And so if you are at the beginning of your journey on using generative AI, I would encourage you to take a screenshot of this. This is a format. Again, it's the race format, but you've got role, action, context, and expectation spelled out so you don't forget that you need to add each one of those areas. All right, so we need to touch on, what are some of the things that we need to consider that may be best practices and limitations within using the generative AI. And AI in general, we need to think about ethics, and we need to think about, is there sensitive data? Is there public trust that we could perhaps malign? Is there regulatory and legal compliance? And then what is potentially a long-term impact? And with AI tools, these are some of the things that we need to think about. And again, in our full day courses, we go into this topic in quite a bit in depth. And the graphic that shows here is it gives a sort of the ripple effect of an unethical AI decision. And so, something that comes out of an AI tool can have both the reputational impact of the individual; it could hurt them, as well as the department or the component or the agency. But then there could be legal impacts, and then potentially even the social impacts as well. And I just noticed there was one question that came up from one of the individuals, and it was, can you give an example of a role? And so a role here is the description of an individual that you want the system to take in mind. So usually the role is the job title that you have or the job role that you have. But you can ask the system to sort of simulate a different job role as well. And for the what do you call it? For the purpose of prompt engineering, I typically use project manager, or this is for let's see, another role that I've used. Oh, I've done some vacation planning for my family. So the role that I used was as a father with two teenage daughters. I need some suggestions when we go to this city, and this city. So that hopefully that helps you understand what a role, what role means there. All right. As part of our full day courses, we also go over all the guidance that's out there. There are several memorandums and executive orders that are relevant. But the bottom line is that as federal workers, you have both the mandate to use AI, but also the mandate to govern it responsibly. So we would go into that much more in depth during those classes as well. And then I'm going to share a couple of low risk and high risk use cases on using AI as project and program people. And so, when we think about drafting project summaries, that's pulling from data that you've provided, generating more templated or structured status reports. These are pretty low risk. Identifying risks from other project artifacts, and then preparing drafts of briefings. So these are all some of the low risk items that we have available. Now we need to think about some of the areas that we need to be careful about. So obviously, if we're data sensitivity, so data control is important. Privacy and confidentiality. If there's potential in bias, we want to make sure that isn't in our outputs. Transparency. This is when we want to understand what our vendors and other of the Gen AI tools, what are they doing under the hood? So there should be some understanding of what's happening there. And then lastly, any sort of record retention and traceability. These are all areas as part of the federal workforce we need to think about. So this then implies that we've got some high risk use cases as project and program managers. So we don't want to input sensitive or non-public data into these systems unless there is some controls over that. We don't want to use AI to make final decisions. Obviously, personnel, performance, HR related, these are things that, these are high risk use cases. Having policy interpretations and compliance determinations. So you can probably get some good recommendations out of these systems for interpreting policy and compliance, but the actual determination, this would be a high risk use case. And then generating communications that you share out with others without doing a review, that in itself is something that it would be high risk as well. Okay, so we're starting to get to the close here with the Project Management Institute. Here's a good quote from them. And it's sort of the last topic that we have. Project management expertise and domain knowledge still remain essential. These Gen AI tools amplify rather than replace professional judgment. And so that's one of the things you need to think about. As I've told people, I see Gen AI tools as sort of another tool that we as in our jobs use to help us be more efficient, help us understand complexity, and to help us make decisions better. But they're not necessarily there to replace us. And within the the field of project management, AI is really it's there to augment project managers, not to replace them. Our human judgment is still key and essential, and it's important that we are in the loop to make sure that we're there to consider any sort of trade-offs, understanding the political and sort of organizational context. We're going to have the ethical backgrounds, and we're also ultimately going to be accountable for this as well. So, again, I want you to sort of think about that AI is going to augment the work that we do. It is not there to replace us. And then in closing today, my hope is that you've got an understanding that AI is really, it's becoming more embedded into our tools. This can become more embedded into the workflows. Generative AI specifically is very helpful with analysis, summarization, generating communication and briefings. But we're still responsible for reviewing, validating, and applying our judgments to the outputs before they get circulated further. And then ethical use of AI really asks us to zero in and focus on the data sensitivity, transparency of the tools, and the oversight as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we've got several related training classes. And so I believe someone had a question about the prompt engineering. There's this Tech 7015 is probably the one, if you really want to beef up and practice prompt engineering, that's probably the best one. But in general, these can all be found at our website. And let me put that in the chat again. We've got lots of different offerings. But AI for project management, that's a specific day-long course. We have AI fundamentals for government employees, prompt engineering for the government workforce, and then also we've got advanced prompt design and reasoning strategies for government professionals as well. So we've many, many more. I just chose a subset to share here today with you. All right, so Amanda, I think we're at the point to review. Are there any additional questions logged into our Q&A tool to see if we have anything? So feel free to add any questions into the Q&A tool, and we'll try to address those. And Sharon, thank you for that comment.
Yeah, we answered a couple throughout, so you're in a good place, Bruce.
All right. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for your participation. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And please do take the one pager, reflect on areas that are there repetitive, are there labor heavy work that you do that you could actually apply AI to. So again, have a wonderful day. It's been my pleasure speaking with you today, and have a wonderful week.